Ever felt stuck? Stuck between the business idea and making it real? Stuck in a pile of paperwork trying to bring a loved one to a new country? Or stuck trying to figure out how to protect your family from the future through estate planning? Unsure where to even begin? These are the moments that define us, the forks on the road where we find ourselves caught between the problem and the solution, unsure of the path forward. Welcome to Stuck in the Middle Podcast, a podcast where we talk to experts who help us navigate these tough spots. I'm your host, Uncle AK, and today we have someone who has built their entire professional practice around helping people get unstuck. Her name is Mildred Tambunde, Esquire, an attorney. And if I say Esquire, do I see an attorney again?
No.
Okay. You see that? Okay. Her name is Mildred Tambunde, an attorney and the driving force behind Red Mill Law. Her firm specializes in what she calls a legal trifecta: business law, immigration law, and estate planning. These three distinct fields share one powerful common thread: to serve people during critical life transitions. Today, we'll explore these trifectas. We'll learn how to legally protect our business, navigate the immigration system, and also estate planning. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a family member, a driver, or someone who does not know the importance of writing a will or even owning one or having one, right? This episode is for you. So buckle up and man, let's talk to Mildred. Let's learn everything about Mildred Tambunde Esquire and Red Mill Law. Welcome to Stuck in the Middle Podcast, Mildred.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Uncle AK. And thank you for that very warm introduction and welcome.
For people who don't know who you are, I mean, this is the very first time I'm Stuck in the Middle podcast, and you're not seasoned in the world of, let's say, content creation or even exposing yourself out there to the world, right? You've always been in the background, and now you are in the foreground. If I'm just using words here, and you are showing people, your talents, who you are. So let's begin like this. You're an attorney, right? For those who don't know the process of becoming an attorney, what was that process like for you? Have you always wanted to be one? And have you always been one? What was that process like for you? And you started, Red Mill. How is that going? Why did you start it? What was the purpose of it? Yeah, let's start like that.
Okay. So, I guess you have already given the people a brief intro of who I am. But if I might restate, I am Mildred Tambunde. And of course, while I proudly carry the title of Esquire or attorney, my journey to law has always been deeply personal. Yes, it's something I've always wanted to do. I mean, I think that, growing up as a child, I had two choices. It was either I wanted to be a doctor or, eventually an attorney. But I just, the medical field was not for me. So, of course, it ended up, being the legal field. But I would say as a child, I did come from a background where I witnessed a lot of firsthand how access to justice or the lack of it can shape people's lives in a certain way. And that experience instilled in me a deep sense of responsibility to be a voice for those who often go unheard. I've always had a very keen eye for injustice. I was always pointing out, this is wrong. Oh, you can't do this. You can't say that. You can't treat this person like this. And, to the point where I got the nickname pocket lawyer from a child. I was, an infant. I'm always advocating for people. So I was called a pocket lawyer. And then, as I grew up, got a bit older, my mom used to have a store. And my primary responsibility was to make sure I kept the books straight. I was always balancing accounts, keeping money, holding money, making sure that everything was the way it was supposed to be, checking stock and all that. And then again, I got another title. And this time it was Money Eye.
Mm.
which is, pigeon for, what would you call it? I don't know what you call that in
But who
English.
loves money?
Yeah,
You're in love with money. Like,
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, at that point, I never ever imagined how these two titles were going to marry at some point. But it's who I was, it's who I am, and I just, I guess, stuck to the course until, I got to where I am. Um, how did I get into law? Well, of course, I did um have a bachelor's degree in law. That was my first degree, and then eventually got a business law degree, master's. And again, like I said, stuck to the course, and here we are.
mhm, man, that's wonderful. To actually, believe in something and actually walk your way through it and see the fruits of your labor. A lot of people only think about it, sometimes and not see it through and
Mhm.
find themselves in some place and say, oh, yeah, I wish I had followed my path, and you're actually doing it. So now that you got your master, your business, law degree, lawyers get degrees or
Well, I mean, it's a degree, quote unquote, but the degree that allows you to be able to practice law is a Juris Doctorate. And that's a JD. That's your initial, legal degree, and you can stop there. But some people decide to go ahead and, specialize in a specific field if, that's what they wanted to do, which
right,
is what I did,
right.
getting a master's in business law.
Okay. What about immigration law?
Okay, so I know we might think business and immigration law are two very different, two very opposing branches of law. But it depends on what angle you're looking at it from. Because for me, it was, the thing that I found myself in, and had to do, and, just gain the experience while I was at it. Um, I did support a business over the last decade, in different capacities, in administrative capacities and in legal capacities.
Mhm.
And during my tenure, with the organization, depending on the kind of business that you have, of course, every business needs employees. And depending on of course, the field of business or the location, some of these employees tend to be immigrants. So, with a legal background, they're like, okay, what do we do? That would, even without prior exposure to what needs to be done, we get into research. What do? We have an employee here who is from X country, has X background. How can we, as an organization, help them to immigrate into the US? So that's how it started. That's how immigration became part of what I did. Um, help people petition for maybe H-1B visas. That is, comes with employer sponsorship.
Mhm.
And then it starts like that. Then eventually down the road, okay, this person that your company sponsored becomes the permanent resident. Okay, now they want to help their family immigrate. Then you start making family petitions. Or you have another employee who is, maybe an asylee, for example, has a court date coming up. They're panicking. They don't know what to do. And there's an attorney in the house. Oh, let me just go speak with her and figure out, what I can do. Then, you have to get into researching. What do I do? How do I advise them? And stuff like that. So it's just a little bit of always people coming up. Oh, what can I do? How can you help me? What would you advise that I do? I guess that is how I honed my skills really in immigration law, which was not eventually what was not initially my area of practice, but with time, with handling dozens or hundreds of cases, it's become an area where I feel very comfortable with, and it's working.
Right.
So yeah.
So you don't necessarily like, for example, in the IT world, where an individual who knows AWS, for example, and want to get say GCP, right? They got to go get a GCP certification. Do you have to get a license for that on top of your business license, or is just once you get that GD, right, that covers all?
Yeah, a JD technically is a general, degree. So you touch on every aspect of, every area where the law might interfere. With immigration law specifically, I don't know of any immigration law class that I had to take in school.
Gotcha.
But you're taught how to do legal research. That is a compulsory course. Everybody takes that. Everybody does that. How to do legal research and writing, and I guess that is the most, in my opinion, that's probably the most important skill we learn in law school. How to do research and how to make persuasive arguments through legal writing.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, the motive for your business is strength tempered with compassion. Can you explain that?
Okay, well, I believe that everyone who's coming to see an attorney to get some kind of help is because they have some kind of problem they're struggling with. They have an issue that they don't know how to navigate, or sometimes it could be problems where they're hard pressed, they're pressed for time, pressed for a solution. So people usually come very desperate, and when they're desperate, they tend to be very emotional, and I believe that every good attorney, every good advocate needs to have that, keen listening ear. You need to be able to be compassionate, understand what the problem is, meet them in their place of need. And then from that, tailor a solution that is suited specifically for them and for the problem that they're facing. So, yes, you would have to be compassionate. However, you also have to zealously advocate for your clients. That's where the strength comes in, because yes, you're compassionate, you're soft, you listen, you learn, you empathize, but at the end of the day, how do we move on from here? What is the solution to this problem? Which is, I guess, why I believe that strength tempered with compassion could, there was probably no other philosophy I could go by. Mhm.
Let me step outside of a planned question real quick and ask this.
Mhm.
Get this out of my head real quick before we get back to plan. You've watched Suits, right?
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
are all
Yes.
lawyers like in their minds and we're going into it? Is everybody's perception like, oh, I gotta be that dapper, and I gotta be that dapper, from haircut all the way down to the shoe? Is that like the perception?
Well, I think that being an attorney or being a successful attorney comes with, first of all, it starts off with perception. How do people perceive you when they see you? And unfortunately, we are human beings. The first thing you notice about somebody is their appearance. If I come here looking shabby, looking raggedy, you probably will not take me seriously. So I think I have to be presented in the way that I want to be addressed, the way that I want to be perceived. So yeah, you would have to, look a certain way to play the role.
Yeah.
Yes, in my opinion, yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just before I started, is I was comparing backgrounds. I was looking at my own and looking at yours. Like, I guess that's why you guys get paid the big bucks, huh? You show up with your with your fancy clothes, looking all straight and stuff. Now that also leads me to ask, a lot of people might be sitting thinking that maybe not thinking, maybe it's reality, right? Lawyer fees are expensive. So for business law, immigration law, is it different? Like a price different from like criminal law and things like that? Of course, but I'm talking in terms of price difference, right? Just ease our minds. Like for us who are thinking, oh, this might be, breaking the bank. What is it like?
Well, I'd say it's difficult to really answer that question definitively, but I'd say that every case, the price for every case depends on the complexity of the case. What are we dealing with? How many different steps? Some people may think, okay, let's say for example, every family petition has X dollar amount, but there are some petitions where maybe it had been tried before and there was an issue, there was a glitch somewhere, there's a problem now that needs to be resolved. It makes it more complex. So I'll say depending on the complexity of each case, that would drive the pricing. However, we're always trying to meet our clients where they are, because of course without our clients, we don't have work.
Right.
So I think, we, or Red Mount Law specifically, always tries to work with clients to ensure that we um, can meet them within their budget, however, without undercutting ourselves as well.
Mhm.
Mhm.
When you say it sounds way better, red mile law. What
Yes.
does that stand for? I mean, I can tell the last part is your name, the first part of your name, but what is the first part? The red stand for what does red stand for?
Red. Mildred.
Okay.
Yes.
Why
So
red? Why not blue? Why not gold? You know.
well, red, Mildred. So mild is mild. Red is
Mhm.
red. So red mild.
Did that. I see what you
Ding,
did there.
ding,
Okay.
ding, ding. There you go.
I see what you did there. Okay, 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 okay. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Anybody did not get it? Let's talk business. Back to business law. Are you for big businesses or for individual business? For individuals who are just LLC owners, like talk to us about the services anybody or a corporation would get under business law.
Again, no two people have the same needs.
Mm-hmm.
Corporations, my background, like I told you, the bulk of my background, which has been business law, but in the healthcare sector.
Okay.
And I did a lot of, healthcare compliance. I did a lot of, um, employment compliance as well in healthcare. But then doing that in order before you become that big business, before you get to become that big employer, you started off as a single member LLC, for example.
Yep.
So it does give me, and my support with that organization was from the ground to the top. So it's given me a wide range of experience, from seeing how to start a business to actually growing that business, to scaling, exiting, or selling the business, or whatever you may want to do. And for some people, for some clients, I meet them at that inception phase where they're still trying to figure out what is going to be the perfect legal structure for my business. How am I forming? Where am I incorporating? How do I ensure that I am doing the necessary reportings? What am I doing? So I support businesses, regardless of where they are, inception, growth phase, or exiting. I have seen it all.
Yeah. So since you've seen it all, could you please just tell us what is one thing that you see businesses or individuals, well, like a mistake they make, right? That ends up costing them a lot, especially not trusting, legal representation.
With businesses, I think there's a lot of services out there now, on the internet, where you say, okay, just come in, pay $100 and we'll help you form or start your LLC, we'll help you register your LLC. That's good enough. That's if you're doing what you're doing. But these services don't give you the legal infrastructure that you need as a business. If you want to start up a business, what kind of entity are you trying to form? What's the business structure? A lot of people know about an LLC. An LLC has two types. There's an S corp, there's a C corp. Which one are you picking? Are you a sole proprietor? Why would you go with this over that? What are the tax implications of each business structure? What are the liabilities that I have, and stuff like that? And I think that this one size fits all solutions for entity formations do not really capture this, and eventually people get to spend less to start, and then end up costing them a lot later.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that have to go into actually starting, and a business, and ensuring that it stays sustainable.
Just real quick here again. I don't know if I'm creating businesses, services here for you, but if somebody's in tax, trouble, can they hit you up?
Depends. It depends. I'm not a tax attorney.
Okay.
And quite frankly, tax law is not something I really wanted to do.
Mhm.
But it would depend, because an attorney could, help identify the problem. You might think you have a problem, you don't know the kind of problem that you have.
Right.
Could help you identify the problem and figure out, direct you where you could find a solution. So if it's attached to the business, yes, I should be able to, direct you, send you in the right direction, if it's not something that I can personally handle.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Just saying, because some of you might just see pretty guy and you bring your tax problems, thinking, don't bring it. I'm just saying. But let's switch gears a little bit to immigration law. Amongst the various paths that your firm offers, which are again on immigration law, right? Family petition, adjustments of status, citizenship, and asylum. what are the biggest bureaucratic or emotional challenges that catches people off guard?
So I think that across all the immigration paths, whether it's a family petition, adjustment of status, citizenship, or asylum, the most unexpected and emotionally draining challenge when it comes to immigration is the long and unpredictable wait. Processing times can stretch from months to years, and they sometimes change without warning. And many people file immigration petitions assuming that they will, hear back soon. But the reality is, even for very less complex petitions, like somebody filing for their child or their parent who is over a certain age, you would expect, oh, that's going to go pretty fast. Well, that depends where you are. Different states have different processing times. Different situations have different timelines. So most people get hit in the face when they figure out, hey, it may take longer than I expected. And they get frustrated about that. So I think that's the one thing I always, remind people is, it could take anywhere from months to years. If you're ready to do it, do it. If you're not, then you might want to just figure something else out.
I've always wanted to ask this question. Does the amount of money your family got matters in the United States? Does wealth matter when it comes
For
to the immigration thing?
No, I wouldn't say it matters because let's say if you're filing for maybe a family petition for your wife, for example, your husband or your wife trying to petition for your spouse, the only place where money comes into play is you would have to, submit an affidavit of support to ensure that you're able to support this person
Right.
while they are here in the US, that they will not become a public charge. And there are guidelines, poverty guidelines, that determine how much money you need to be making depending on your household size, and the amount of people that you're supporting in this immigration petition. And once you've hit the threshold, then you have nothing else to prove. So for example, if the poverty guideline says, oh, you have to make maybe at least $50,000 a year in order to support this person, all you probably would need is maybe your tax returns to show that you made that kind of money, and that's it. You don't need to show anything else. So
Right.
I wouldn't really say that money has a big role to play if you're richer or you're poorer. No, as long as you hit the threshold, you're good.
Gotcha. What is one thing other than timeline do you find yourself explaining more and more often, when it comes to, US immigration, like another misconception?
I think that a lot of people also think, oh, it's easy to immigrate legally if you just follow the rules. Oh, because immigration is something, a lot of people have tried it on their own and they were successful, and they believe that, oh, it's easy. But like I said, not no two people have the exact same situation. Because I did a family petition for my spouse does not mean that if you do the same, you will get the same results. So people think, just following the book, doing what another person did is going to get you the same result. It wouldn't, or most likely, would put you in a more precarious situation. So it's not very straightforward as people think. There's a lot of rules and there's a lot of exceptions to the rules that only somebody who knows what the rules are can help you navigate if, exceptions would apply to you. And given the new policy changes and how immigration law is expanding, it's become something that is more complex and not very advisable for people to attempt it on their own if um, they're not really versed with what the law stipulates.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, there are some things that, I feel like I can do. And there's some
Mhm.
things that I feel like, yeah, it's just better to delegate.
Mhm.
Immigration issue is one of those things like I got to delegate. I've never sat a day in my life to sit and read something about immigration. I could
Right.
read the news or I could read like a headlines and be like, okay, yeah. But to actually go and dig the information for it, oh nah, that's beyond my pay grade. But anyways, like I said, that's why you guys wear the fancy suits, the fancy, dresses and whatnot. But something that I've really been also curious about. I love watching British shows. I'm talking about the old school ones, where they got the big homes like Downton Abbey, for example. And you
Mhm.
always hear them talk about estates, protecting estates or something about estates. I'm like, dude, what the heck is an estate? What can I not call my home an estate? Things like that. So, anyways, what is an estate? Let's start there first. What's an estate?
So an estate, if you want to speak of it in lay terms, is technically just everything that you own.
Right.
If something were to happen to you today, what properties do you have attached to your name? Property could be real estate, it could be financial, bank accounts, it could be insurance policies. What is going to be left behind that would need to be distributed? That's technically what constitutes your estate.
So, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like a rich person's problem. Is it just a rich person's problem?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So,
Absolutely not.
so let's talk about it then.
Uh-huh.
For somebody who's listening right now, right, they might be thinking, man, I don't know where to start, to create an estate, or what really is it, or how to, go about it. What should they do?
I think that when it comes to estate planning, I think everybody who has assets or has dependents and has specific instructions for how they would like their assets to be distributed in case something were to happen, if they become incapacitated or they pass, what happens to what they leave behind or to the people they leave behind. That's how an estate plan comes into play. What are we doing? And some people think, oh, an estate plan is only for when I pass. No, sometimes you know you could be going into surgery, or you have an accident and you become incapacitated. At that point, who makes decisions on your behalf? What happens to your finances? You need some kind of power of attorney, designating somebody to make decisions on your behalf if you're not able to make those decisions. So it's not just about death, it's not just about the afterlife. It also guides how things happen in case the unexpected were to happen.
Mm-hmm. A will and a trust. What's the difference?
A will, technically, a will would help you designate how your assets are managed. Okay, they do the same things but in different ways. A trust does the same thing, but because a trust, most people would set up what you call a living trust, a revocable living trust. And that trust you set up while you're still alive, and you put assets in the trust to fund the trust so that the trust is active. And because that trust was established during your lifetime, and you've probably done things with your trust, right? You've probably maybe bought a house and put it in the name of your trust,
Mm-hmm.
or you've bought maybe some property, or you have some insurance policies that you've put in the name of your trust. So it is a clear, in law you say it's prima facie evidence that this is what you actually wanted to happen to your estate, because you were alive, you created it, and this is how it functioned while you lived. So if you were to pass on, there are no questions as to, is this really real? Is this really what the decedent expected? However, with a will, the first time we're ever seeing a will, the first time we're ever talking about a will is when somebody has already passed. That's the first time we're seeing this document. So they become questions about, is this real? Is it authentic? Can we question, its contents? You have people whom you've designated, different capacities in the will, different distributions in the will. People are coming up and saying, no, my mom loved me more than she loved this person. I am so surprised that she only left me 20% of X asset. No, I would like to contest the will.
Right.
So stuff like that. It's the first time we're all seeing this document. So it raises a lot of questions and doubts as to its authenticity, as opposed to a trust that has been established while you were alive and has been, functioning in the way that you established it. So trust do not go through probate, as in it doesn't go through court for the court to determine, how it functions, but a will must be probated. It must go through, for a judge to actually say, yes, we're going to enforce it, or no, we're not. We're going to make XY amount of changes to it.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I only ask that question because there is the guy who owns I think it's Fox.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's his name? I forget his name. But his kids are a battle for ownership, even while the guy's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it it blows my mind. Every time I hear about it on the news, I'm like, yo, like guy's still alive. Why we
Are we fighting about his
what we
assets?
fighting about his assets already? But it's very interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's something that one needs to really sit down and really read about. But all right. So a common concern, like I mentioned earlier, is a lot of us we think about cost. A lot of things. Some people out there that just don't worry about cost. They got it like that. For those who don't got it like that and they want to establish, an estate. Again, what should they do? Right? How should I approach it?
When you talk
Now, the
about
idea of, oh, this might break my bank or my pockets. How should I approach it?
It depends on what like you said, everybody has a different threshold when it comes to breaking the bank,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it depends on your individual threshold. And an estate plan, there's such a thing as a 360 estate plan, which means you're attacking everything. You're attacking, your will, your trust, your powers of attorney, and stuff like that. Some people break it down. I don't have to do it all today. What is the most important thing for me today? And you start with that, and then eventually you work your way up and do everything else that is required. But as opposed to fearing the costs and shying away from doing it, start with something, do one thing, and then you come back and do something else, and then eventually at some point you have your estate fully protected and managed in the way that you would like it to be.
Mm-hmm. What age do you say is the right time to start?
I'd say as long as immediately you have assets, you need to start. Assets, again, like I said, could be real property, it could be financial property, it could be um, insurance policies. As long as you have anything that you worry about, what happens to these things if I were no longer there, you need to start planning. If you have children, for example, you have minor children, if you were to pass on today, who becomes guardian? Who's making decisions as a parent on behalf of this child? If you've not already designated someone, the court will have to figure that out for you. Now, the court knows nothing about you and what your personal preferences would be. So, do you want somebody who knows nothing about you making those decisions about your child? Or, do you want to take ownership and make sure that things happen the way you want it to be? And one thing people fail to understand, we have the issue of special needs. A lot of people these days coming up with special needs children. Legally, once you pass on, your special needs child becomes a ward of the state, which means the state takes ownership of this child and they make the decisions on behalf of the child. So you will need to make those designations to take that power away from the state. You don't want them, deciding what happens to your child. You want to be able to do that. So I think it's more important than, anything else. You need to make these decisions. You need to, have it down, make sure it's legal, make sure it's acceptable, in order to ensure that the people that you care for are protected if you are no longer there.
Got it. Got it. Let's discuss TCP, temporary protected status.
Okay.
For those who
TP.
don't know, what is that? And I believe August 3rd, it will be canceled for Cameroonians and several other African countries. Could you discuss it as well as you define what it is and yeah.
Okay, so TPS is temporary protected status, and that is a designation that is made by Homeland Security. And they would, make a decision to designate a particular country as temporary protected. And this would ensure that their citizens who are in the US at the time that the designation is made are protected from deportation, even if they have no other legal status. And they would make the decision to designate temporary protected status over a country if the country is currently facing maybe armed conflict or maybe environmental disasters, just anything that makes it unsafe for citizens to return home. They'll make this assessment and give that designation. So during that time, citizens or nationals from those countries can continue to remain in the US and work while that designation is active. But once it terminates, you have to go back home or seek other legal options to continue to remain in the US.
Sounds very stressful and painful. So now that they're by then now that by August 3rd of this year they're canceling that.
Mhm.
For those who, right, were under this, what would they do? I mean, of course, you said they would seek other legal services, but like leading towards that, what should they do?
Well, first of all, the first thing that people need to understand is if TPS expires, that means you don't longer have legal status. It means you are removable, but does not mean you're going to be immediately deported. No. As of August 3rd, without a legal status, you can be removed. And how does that happen? What triggers it? Usually it would be, people who come into contact with law enforcement. You commit a crime and then they, going through the system and hey, this person is here illegally. That's how you get detained. Or you might have had a pending immigration case that was not successfully adjudicated, I mean, in your favor. So sometimes a judge may order you removed, which means you have to leave the US. If that happens, then you're out of status, you have to leave. You get in contact with law enforcement, you get deported. But the biggest misconception is, oh, as of on August 3rd, oh, I'm going to get deported. No, it's not, it doesn't happen that way. There's a process that it goes through, unless of course you find yourself doing things that you should never have been doing in the first place.
True, true, true. All right. As we're winding down here, at Red Mill Law,
Mhm, mhm,
um, your legal trifecta
mhm,
again: business, immigration, and estate planning.
mhm,
Right?
mhm,
How do all these three work hand in hand? Of course, there are three different services, but there's some commonality amongst them, right?
mhm.
That's the reason why you put these three together. How do they work hand in hand, and how when people wake up to go to their businesses, they have a smile on their face and not grumpy or whichever. How does this make you wake up every day and want to give it your all?
Um, I mean, if we can get a bit personal, when it comes to me and deciding what I want to do, it's a long process because I make sure that I convince myself this is what I want to do and this is why I want to do what I want to do. And as long as I have a very strong why, there's no getting me out of there. This is what I'm doing. It doesn't matter what it takes. So once, that decision is made, the rest comes easy. I mean, I'm someone who understands that life comes with challenges. It throws a lot of curveballs at you. But some of them would escape. Some of them could meet you right there in crossfire. You bleed a little bit, you heal, you move on. The ones you can escape, you escape and keep it moving. But one thing we don't do is to stay down crying and like, oh, life was not fair to me. Oh, I'm so sad, you're sulking, you're angry at everyone. No. Yeah, so I think for me, it's more about understanding that this is what I want to do. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I will stay to the course unless, the Lord pushes me in another direction. But for now, this is where I am, and this is where I want to be.
Yeah, so man, something we've got to learn. Each and every one. Well, some of us who procrastinate got to learn. But for our listeners who might be feeling stuck in one of these areas today, right? What single piece of universal advice can you offer to help them start taking control? Start taking back control of their lives and moving forward. I know you've already said one thing there. Do not sub. Just keep pushing. But what else can they do? What other piece of
I
advice?
I think that for me, especially, I mean, life gets challenging when you have problems, right? That's when, that's when life really happens, when you have problems. And all of us at some point in our lives are going to face some kind of challenge, some that we can navigate through by ourselves and others that will need help. But the one thing that you don't do when you're faced with challenges is blaming someone else for your problems. um, you know, as much as or as difficult as it sounds, you'd have to take ownership at some point and say, okay, I see how I contributed to this problem. You may not have been the 100% contributor or the shareholder in your problem, but somewhere somehow you did something that got you, in a position that is making things difficult for you. So as opposed to playing victim, I think you have to rise up to the occasion, take ownership. take stock of your life, understand what is the problem, what is actually happening. And I think that once you understand what the problem is, the solutions just flow. But if you don't understand your problem, you keep pushing blame, shifting, somebody else caused it. You'll never really, look into what is really holding you back and try to figure something out, because you're expecting somebody else to come in and save the day because they are the ones, they are the reason for why you're here. Well, guess what? Nobody's coming. We're adults. Nobody's coming to save you. You have to save yourself. So I think it's, let us stop blame shifting or playing victim. Understand your problem, craft a solution. Be it step by step. Sometimes you have mountain problems, truckload problems, or itty bitty mustard seed problems. Break it down to how you can handle piece by piece, one foot after the other. And eventually you get there. It might take time. It might, be a bit of crying here and there, but you'll find a solution eventually if you stick to the course.
There you have it. I
Yeah.
think it's a perfect place to conclude, in your firm, or in a law firm, right? I'm trying to go by the movies and I'm forgetting. There's the person that's on the top, how did they call it? I don't want to use the word CEO.
Managing partner.
Managing partner,
Uh-huh.
She's the managing partner at, wait, do you say top managing partner or managing partner?
Managing partner.
Just managing partner. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She's the managing partner at Red Mill law firm.
Mhm.
This was a very dope conversation. Thank you, for gracing us with your presence, and all that aesthetics back there. You make some of us setups look mediocre. Chai. Anyways, listen. How can people connect with you?
Well, like you said, I've come out of hibernation. So, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok is Mildred Tambunde. You know the name, you know how to find me. LinkedIn, a simple Google search, Mildred Tambunde or Red Mouth Law is going to pull me up. But contact number is 202 400 2858. Or, you can always email me as well. Email is on the website or, on any of my social media platforms. But I am reachable. Just one call away. If you need me, call me. I'll answer.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
all that information will be in the show notes as well. So you don't have
Okay.
to, writing it down will be in the show notes, and clickable links so you can click and it will take you, there for those who are lazy like that. Because again, we live in a world where everything is supposed to be fast paced. But again, thank you for gracing us with your presence. Hopefully, as you add your services or your firm grows bigger and bigger and bigger, you'll come back and we could talk more about the services that you add, or if you think, there's some more immigration, information that people should know, or even
Mhm.
business information as well. Come back and let's talk about it and put the information out there.
Sure, I'll be happy to.
For sure, for sure. To the listeners, remember, if you feel stuck, there are guides who can help you find your way forward. Like Mildred, you just need to take the first step and reach out. Again, the six close mouths don't get fed. Or have a problem shared is have a problem solved. I'm your host, Uncle AK. Until next time, just talking to the podcast. Catch you next one. Peace.